Huge differences in the Aston Martin 2023 car. Aston Martin is on track to experience massive changes for the 2023 season. The news that is coming from the team is already very positive, and it seems like the team is now finally ready to get back, not just in the midfield, but for podiums and wins as well. This is just one of their many projections for the next season, in which they would dive in with a two-time world champion, Alonso, and the owner's son, Lance Stroll, who has yet to prove his potential from the Williams days. Aston Martin also revealed a slew of new features for the 2023 model, all of which looks fantastic.
We are racing in Abu Dhabi with a good reaction time.
The British-based team has found its groove in the second half of the season, managing to finish P7 with the exact same number of points as Alfa Romeo. This has given them a lot of hope, and considering the fact that they have already built new wind tunnel facilities and poached staff from all around the grid, especially Red Bull and Mercedes, things are finally looking up for the green Red Bull, as the AMR22 was once called. While many are eager to see how Alonso will fit with Stroll, the guy that blocked his way and crashed the Spaniard in Austin, nearly sending him off the track, Aston Martin has the big picture ahead of them, and that includes winning races and podiums. According to the two-time world champion, this isn't utopia or a far-fetched scenario, concluding that Aston Martin can definitely beat Alpine in 2023. Some bold words were said by the guy who had a lot of issues with his former teammate Esteban Ocon. Obviously, it's not something Aston Martin wants to deal with heading into the new season, as both Alonso and Stroll confirmed after the 2022 season ended. But no one knows what will happen when two drivers compete for points, because we've seen Stroll being extra competitive with Vettel for just 1 point on the table, which is a remarkably good spirit, but it's not always on the positive side of things.
From the front row, pretty even. Will Sergio Perez dive to the inside? Can Sergio Perez dive to the...
What we do know as of now is that Aston Martin's 2023 car will undergo significant changes compared to the 2022 season. This has been proven by the technical director of the team, Dan Fallows, who spoke about the expectations of the team and the changes that have been implemented on the car, while being careful and not revealing a ton of things. I mean, there is a limit to what we can do with the current rules. I know that new cars always have to pass my test of my children, so if I put them in front of my children and they say they look different, then they look different. They always say they all look the same, Daddy. But within the envelope of the rules that we have, then yes, there are significant differences to the AMR23. One of the biggest things that will have to change for the 2023 rules is the floor of the car, mostly because with raising the ride height by 15mm, the ground effect will now change, and with the new floor changes that were introduced by the FIA in order to battle porpoising and bouncing, all of the teams need to push for that extra mile in order to make the floor a very unique one. After the 2022 season, every team saw that the more complex the floor is, the better it battles the porpoising, as Red Bull served as the perfect example to the rest of the grid. Fallows continued to talk about the floor regulations, further adding, "The new floor regulations are not an enormous change in reality, but they have had a reasonable dent in terms of the downforce the cars are able to produce. So we've had to try and overcome that deficit as well as everyone else will do. I think it's difficult to say whether some teams will be more affected than others, but certainly for us it was a reasonably significant downforce hit. But we're obviously hoping for what the FIA is hoping for as well. It will help with everybody's aerodynamic oscillations, which we are obviously very keen to get rid of. The fact that Aston Martin was so bad in the first half of the season, and then found a groove in the second half, nearly scoring a massive amount of points in Austin, if not for Stroll's accident and Vettel's slow pit stop, just goes to show that they are on the right track. For the first time since Lawrence Stroll purchased the team, it appears that he understood that the proper way to avoid being labelled a copycat is to create something innovative, something unique. That is why the hopes of Aston Martin having a dominant or proper season in 2023 are really high, and this is something that has been shared by the new Aston Martin driver Fernando Alonso.
Wobble is really important for the Constructors' Championship if Vettel can...
The two-time world champion has taken over for Vettel, who hasn't had a good time with the former Racing Point team and may have decided to leave because of the pace that Aston Martin provided. However, the team has made massive progress now, and it seems like Lawrence's funds are finally where they're supposed to be. Alonso has had a chance to test out the Aston Martin car in the last race of the season, Abu Dhabi, when the tyre tests were being completed, and his response was truly shocking as to how the car has behaved. When talking about the team's future and what he expects from Aston Martin in 2023, Alonso added, "When I signed for Aston Martin, I was 90% happy. When they started to improve and finish the season on a high, I was 100%. This morning, I was 100%. Now I'm more than 100% happy. I've been pleasantly surprised by everything, but this year's car is not close to what we are going to run next year, so there's nothing to be confident about or anything like that. There's not going to be continuity with this car." For sure, they had a very strong weekend here, Abu Dhabi. Sebastian qualified ahead of me, so I don't think there was much difference between Aston and Alpine over the weekend, and I felt basically the same as well. I felt a very competitive car. Obviously, Aston Martin wants to hire proven champions and drivers that know how to win races, which is why the next proper choice after Vettel was Alonso. While many expected the team to pick Mick Schumacher, who was desperate to prove himself in the sport and is close to Vettel, Lawrence appears to have decided not to jeopardize his son's seat and prove to the world that he doesn't know how to drive an F1 car. The question now remains, who will be the number one driver in an Aston Martin? We've seen Vettel and Stroll fighting hard, and although the German had the better car out of the Canadian with a more competitive car, who would have the preference? The logical answer to this question would be Lance Stroll, given the fact that he is the owner's son and would always be the number one guy to be picked in Aston Martin. But when talking about this issue, Mick Crack, the team principal of Aston Martin, had a very interesting response, further adding, "We don't have anything like that, number one driver, and we won't have it in the future either. So we have to be prepared for the fact that they're going to be tough on each other on the track. That's unfortunate, of course, and not what you want to see, but that kind of thing just happens when you have two equally fast drivers that are in the same place. It goes without saying that Alonso and Stroll's speed aren't comparable at any given point, and Alonso is an old fox that has a trick or two up his sleeve in order to assert his dominance. Although he wasn't quite able to do so in Alpine, a team with which he mostly struggled with reliability issues, the situation will be very different in Aston Martin.
Very good, still looking good. Copy, mate. The Perez is now
The fact that Alonso signed a 3-year deal worth $15 million per season in his 41st year of life goes to show that he doesn't plan on stopping anytime soon. He played Alpine very well, forcing them to lose Piastri as well in a matter of 48 hours. But that is in the past, and the future looks very promising. Whether Aston Martin will have the right machinery to fight for podiums or even an occasional win, only time will tell. What we are mostly happy for is the fact that they are finally understanding that the right way to win in Formula One is not by copying others, but by being ingenious and building something on your own. What are your thoughts on the 2023 version of the Aston Martin car? Let us know in the comments below.